Going live. Just 1 second here. Get this started. Great. All right. Here we go. Welcome to CinemaScope. I'm Andy Nelson. Each episode we map one genre, subgenre, or film movement, what defines it, what shaped it, and what it influenced. Over the past couple of episodes, I have been tracing a loose miniseries looking at how World War II reshaped Hollywood storytelling. We started with post-war westerns, where moral certainty kind of began to fracture. Then we moved into 1950s science fiction, where Cold War anxieties turned into invasion, mutation, and existential threat. Today, we're stepping into the shadows. We're diving into film noir, the dark, fatalistic crime cycle that flourished in the wake of the war. If the Western wrestles with moral order and sci-fi externalizes fears into monsters, noir pulls the pressure inward. Desire becomes dangerous, the past won't stay buried, and even ordinary life starts to feel like a trap. We'll move chronologically across a group of key films. Think of the episode as a guided deep dive you can take in chapters. And as we go, we'll track how noir evolves, from fatal romance in the mid-1940s to psychological and institutional corruption by the end of the 1950s. Joining me is film historian and critic Foster Hirsch, author of Film Noir, The Dark Side of the Screen, and his new book, Hollywood and the Movies of the 50s. Foster, welcome to the show. You hear me, Foster? Did I lose ya? Did you hear me? Uh-oh. I think that you're muted. Or suddenly I'm not hearing you anymore. What happened to your audio? Can you hear me, Foster? Can you hear me? I cannot hear you anymore. I don't know what happened audio-wise. It was working. Can you hear me? You can hear, I can't hear you, but you can hear me. Okay. So I don't know where your audio went. And it doesn't show you as muted. So I think that, I don't know if something came unplugged or, yeah, just not hearing anything. Do you want to hop out and hop back in and see if it reconnects your audio? I just can't hear anything you're saying. There's a chat window over on the right side of the screen. It says private chat. If you click on that, you can type a message to me. Something is amiss. I was hearing you, and it's not like I heard anything disconnect, so I don't know what happened. Oh, I hear you. Oh, I heard you for a brief second. Sounded like you were fidgeting with something. I can't, yeah. You want me to send you or call you? Let me go into my thing here. Here, I'll put my number in the... It's not connected to your phone. I just saw your note. Yeah, we can certainly start over. Yeah, you're hearing me. Why don't you try hit the little leave studio button at the bottom of the screen, and then try coming back into the recording and see if it's something in your computer. It could just be you need to reboot your computer. Who knows? I can't hear you. Here, I'll give you my number in there, and you can call me, and then we can at least hear each other while we sort this out. Hmm. Technical issues, everyone. Technical issues. Whatever you were just doing, like I don't know if you're touching a cord or something, but I hear it starting to connect or something. Something on your phone. It's connecting through your phone is what's happening, it sounds like. Yeah, I can't hear anything. Um, on the bottom of the screen, there's a little microphone image, and if you, oh, you're giving me a call. Okay. Well, hello there.
I think the problem is I was I had something I had to deal with on my email, which I was handling on this phone, and I think that disconnected us.
Yeah. And it suddenly now I don't know what just changed, but I can hear you now through
Yes,
my headphones.
because it's on the phone. I have to leave my phone alone.
Oh, I gotcha.
I
Okay.
see. I was handling an email thing that needed my attention, and it
I see.
interrupted
Okay.
our conversation. So
Okay,
let
gotcha.
me hang up. I won't touch this, and we'll be fine.
Okay, sounds good.
Let me hang up and disconnect.
All right.
Okay, now you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, no, that was the problem. We're fine. I won't
Okay,
I won't
perfect.
touch him. I won't touch.
Okay. No worries, no worries. So I'm going to leave my intro alone and I'm just going to start introducing you and then we can
Fine.
just jump in. Does that work? Okay.
Okay, good.
Joining me today is film historian and critic Foster Hirsch, author of Film Noir, The Dark Side of the Screen, and his new book, Hollywood and the Movies of the 50s. Foster, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you.
I'm thrilled to have you. I really enjoy your books; they're incredibly insightful. Before we dig in, though, I just want to get a sense for. I mean, obviously, with these two books specifically, you have a real passion for films of the '50s, film noir, all of this sort of stuff. And I'm curious, what is your draw to this particular? I don't know if we're calling it a genre, whatever it is, but film noir. What's your draw?
Well, the films are great, and
That's
they
very true. Yeah.
uh, the best of them hold up probably as well as or better than any other kind of commercial American filmmaking of that period. when I host film noir festivals and young people come to the films, they seem to relate to the films, and they don't have to make some kind of an excuse that these are films from the Middle Ages and they're antiques. But there's something in the films. Maybe it's their cynicism,
Yeah.
uh, uh, which certainly is there. Maybe it's the negative undertone that they go against the grain of what we think of as traditional Hollywood optimism or affirmation, and I think that hits a chord with the modern note. Younger people respond to these films
It's
in
great to
ways
hear. Yeah.
in ways that maybe the other genres need more explanation or context, where
Hmm.
there's these films as a sort of direct appreciation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That sort of connection between the dark tone of these films and maybe the cynical uh, moments or notes of the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting connection that you can draw from that period to today, and perhaps why it is an easier uh, set of films for people to just jump into and watch and connect with. I think that's really interesting. As Foster and I continue our conversation, we're going to be chronologically moving through a group of key films. Think of the episode again as kind of a guided noir journey from the mid 40s through the end of the 50s. Across this episode, we're going to be discussing 10 films in order from 1944, Double Indemnity, 1945, Scarlet Street and Detour, 1947, Out of the Past, 1950, In a Lonely Place, 1952, Sudden Fear and The Steel Trap, 1955, Kiss Me Deadly, 1957, Sweet Smell of Success, and last but certainly not least, 1958, Touch of Evil. Five of the films will be part of the main conversation, and all 10 will be heard on the member version. If you'd like to access the member bonus content, you can join for $5 a month or $55 a year. Just head to truestory.fm/join. That's TRUSTORY.fm/join, where you can learn more. So I want to talk kind of like big picture first before we kind of get into more of the nitty gritty specifics of film noir. Film noir is fascinating because it is always. I mean, I loved studying it in college, and it's just all I've always been drawn to it. I think speaking actually to your point earlier about how it's just something that's very easy to get into, and I think it's always remained one of the most enduring and certainly unsettling cycles of the post-war era. You got crime stories that turn into something bigger. You've got this mood of fatalism, desire, mistrust, moral instability. They're not necessarily asking who committed the crime, but they're asking what kind of world produces that crime, right? And what happens when ordinary life starts to feel like a trap. I want to kind of first start what something that really strikes me is that this is a cycle that emerges after victory, right? The war is over. America is economically moving up, and yet the films feel very haunted. They're suspicious of desire, distrustful of institutions, uncertain about stability. Why, Foster, does a culture at this point, at its most powerful, start telling stories that are just so dark?
But that's a good question. But Andy, I would question your claim that this starts after the war. I think film noir really
Well,
begins in the early 40s during the war.
sure, yeah.
And I've been making the claim. Uh, I don't know how to what extent I can support it, but I've been making the claim that in a symbolic sense, film noir really are kind of they represent they're wartime films. That is,
Hmm.
the original films of the cycle. I'm talking about uh, even films before Double Indemnity in 1944, which is still wartime.
Yeah.
They're films that reflect the dislocation and the social and gendered rearrangements brought on by wartime and the darkness of a country at war. All of these are reflected in the crime films of the early 40s, which in many ways set the template for what we now call film noir. But that template really took place as the country was at war. The films are not directly about the war in most
Right.
cases, but almost symbolically, emotionally, they represent a wartime sensibility. After all, films produced at any period reflect the culture of that period, even if not directly.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
culture seeps into the films, and
Right, right,
we
right.
can, at the moment, we're not aware necessarily of all the cultural signs in the movies because we're living through the time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
So
in the early 40s, I would say the films indirectly, but substantively reflected the dislocations of a country at war and the rearrangements mandated by a country at war. And so you get the sexual and social and gendered dislocations that we associate with film noir. Does that make sense in terms of
that makes sense, and I
calling the
guess
war
maybe
films in that way?
yeah, yeah. But I guess then my question would be like, so then why did it extend so long? Like, why are we, 1958 still talking about film noir if it's kind of something that really kind of was born of the war?
I think it extended because, yes, we were uh, a world power after the victory in World War II, but it was an age of anxiety. After all, the atomic bomb, atomic energy, which led to the science fiction uh, explosion of the 1950s,
Right. Yeah.
and the devastations of the Hollywood blacklist and the increasing tensions of the Cold War. Yes, we were the victor. The country was economically stable. We had a president that everybody liked. When I told students the other day that when I was growing up, our president was universally beloved by both Democrats and Republicans. The students could not understand what I was saying. They thought I was making it up. But I
Huh.
said, really, everybody liked Ike, whether
Yeah.
you were Republican or Democrat. He was a decent man and people liked him. But despite all the comforts and security of the time, there was an underlying darkness. It was a time of great political division. People liked Ike, but communists and anti communists were at war with each other. The
Yeah.
right and the left and the McCarthy witch hunts for communists in Washington.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the
Right.
times continued to be dark enough to make the ongoing production of crime movies of the kind that we like so much relevant. They reflected something of the spirit of the times, the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, Before we get too much into like where the films come from, this is a question that certainly comes up in your books, and I want to kind of start with this. When you talk about noir, do you think of it as a genre, a style, a movement, or, I mean, I guess is it something that's slippery, more slippery than that?
It's slippery. It's slippery. I think in a casual way, we've come to consider film noir a genre. If you want to be very strict and orthodox about it, it's probably more accurate to call it a style, because the characteristics of noir can can migrate from one genre to another.
Yeah.
So there can be noir in animation, there can be noir in westerns, as there were, it can be a noir war film. So it's a cluster of stylistic elements and thematic elements that can go from one orthodox genre to another. But I've relaxed that tension between movement or style and genre, and I think it's okay to call it a genre.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I know.
maybe
It's
not orthodox, but we can be relaxed about it.
doing this show, I found myself. I used to feel pretty hard edged with certain genres and subgenres, everything. Now I'm feeling a lot looser with a lot of this. So I totally understand where you're coming from with that. Something that I think ties into kind of what you were saying about how films are of their time. You may not recognize it at that moment, but when you look back at it, it certainly feels that way. And what I think has always fascinated me is that Hollywood wasn't calling these film noir. The term shows up 1946, I think, around there, when French critics actually, they're the ones who see this, they get this backlog of films because they weren't getting any of them during the war. They get this huge backlog of all these American crime pictures, and they kind of recognize, they group them together as films noir or black films. And and then from there, it took American critics even a little longer to really kind of embrace that label. But I'm curious, why do you think it's outsiders that are the ones who were able to more easily recognize something cohesive was happening?
Well, the French critics clustered around Cahiers du Cinema, the leading French cinema
Yeah,
journal, were always very vigilant about American popular films.
yeah,
And as outsiders, perhaps they could see things about the cultural notation of those films that Americans couldn't see for themselves. The French have always been so vigilant about our popular filmmaking. They may not like us very much, but they love our films. So for the French critics, not having a ready access to American films during the occupation of Paris was a real deprivation. And when a group of films was released in a cluster after the war, the critics, of course, descended on the films, devoured them,
yeah,
and they noticed in these movies there was something that was new and different about the films. They had a dark tone as opposed to the usual American optimism and upbeat and affirmation. And being French, of course, they wouldn't give the cycle or movement that they noticed an English term. They gave it a French term, film noir,
yeah,
dark film or black film, which described the new mood that they correctly recognized in this group of films released en bloc in France after the occupation. So we
yeah,
owe film noir as a descriptive term to the French,
yeah.
who
It's
have continued
fascinating.
to be vigilant about our popular filmmaking. And
Right,
as
right.
outsiders, they see things perhaps that we don't see as readily or perhaps take for granted.
Yeah. I want to kind of go move into talking about kind of this cinematic family tree that I go to in my shows. Talk about this kind of this place where all of these films genres all kind of fit, where they're all branching off from each other. There's overlaps. There's cross pollinating. Sometimes something splits into an entirely new limb. Noir is such an interesting case. I mean, I think this fits into what you were saying earlier about it definitely feeling more like a style because it doesn't always feel like its own clean branch. I feel like, and I think fittingly, it feels like something that spreads, right? Or like a shadow, or maybe even like a rot that shows up on certain limbs of the tree. When you think about noir,
It
it
spreads, and
right,
Andy, that spreading is reflected in uh, film noir festivals, where curators and programmers include films that are not strictly hardcore noir,
mm-hmm.
but and at Film Noir Foundation, we've coined the phrase noir stained.
Ooh, I like that.
They have elements of noir, but they wouldn't fit a tight hardcore definition.
Yeah,
So these elements of noir are free floating and can attach themselves to any genre. I worry that any film with a dark shadow or banisters or Venetian blinds projected onto a wall will be given the descriptive term film noir when that might not really be accurate or it might be a huge stretch.
yeah, right,
We
right.
can spread the tent too wide.
Yeah, there is that danger always for sure. I I want to know from you like what other adjacent styles like the gangster film, the thriller, the detective story, melodramas, um, what what makes it distinct from just those as their own branches? Like what are
Well,
is it quality? Is it tone? A
no,
worldview?
no. In my definition, the there certainly can be noir elements to the genres that you mentioned, melodrama, for instance. almost all melodramas would have scenes that would pass muster for in a hardcore film noir
Sure.
in terms of shadow and composition and mise en scène, images of enclosure or entrapment. But
Right, right, right.
to qualify, in my estimation, for noir, there has to be an element of crime. We're
Oh,
talking
okay.
about crime movies.
Yeah. Interesting. Gotcha.
And film noir is, in some ways, an evolution of the original American crime movie cycle, which is the gangster film.
Sure.
I feel that true film noir are not about gangsters. They're about regular middle class people like Walter Neff in Double Indemnity, who, for reasons to be discussed, slip into crime, but who are not born criminals at all.
Right, right, right.
And so the original crime cycle in America was gangster. And that wore itself out very quickly in the early 30s because it didn't have a lot of, in terms of narrative structure, didn't have a wide range. But when we have a new wrinkle in the crime movie, crime is set in unexpected places, in middle class environments, among middle class characters who are not instinctively criminals. And
Yeah.
that gap
Absolutely.
between the law abiding citizen and the noir criminal whirlpool, how do you go from one to the other, is for me the most interesting and arresting progression in noir and what for me defines noir.
Hmm.
How crime of some kind overtakes a character or a lifestyle not inherently criminal.
That's fascinating, and I can definitely see that, especially in these films that we're going to be talking about here. I'm curious, like, you hear a lot of other elements that tie into noir. They maybe don't necessarily define noir, but they tie into them. Femme fatale, the way that the dialogue is incredibly kind of like has a hard boiled, snappy feel to the dialogue. They're not always in everything that's classified as a film noir, but there are certainly elements that are brought up. And as we're kind of gearing up for these movies, if you were to kind of like look and say, okay, to give the listeners a, let's just say, a practical viewing lens of things that they can be thinking about as they go watch the movies, what would you say are those core elements to watch for? Things like fatalism, moral ambiguity, the past as a trap. Are there, and I already mentioned like the femme fatale, the dialogue. Are there some specific things that,
Well, you've outlined some of the crucial ingredients.
yeah,
Sometimes I get asked, does a film noir have to have a femme fatale? No, it doesn't.
right,
And in the 50s, that character type recedes a bit. She's much more prominent in the 40s, much less so in the 50s, for reasons perhaps we can discuss later. Um, but you do have to have certain elements of the kinds that you listed to qualify as noir.
so is there a bucket, like a certain number of things, like how before it gets like film noir, from going from film noir stained, as you your foundation termed it, to film noir, like where's that line? Like how much does it need to have to actually say, okay, this is actually film noir?
Well, first of all, it's a subjective
Of
rendering and a
course,
subjective
of
opinion.
course.
In my mind, there has to be an element of crime. That's the
Yeah,
essential factor.
right, right.
Does there have to be high contrast lighting, chiaroscuro, between light and shadow? In the original noir cycle in the 40s, the high 40s and 50s, yes. But is it possible to have a film noir without any dark shadowing? Yes, it is. It is. But that's not how we traditionally think of it.
Sure.
But you've got to have the element of crime. I think you've mentioned it. There's an increasing amount of moral ambiguity in film noir, and I think that gives the films that contemporary note I was talking about.
Yeah.
So there's not a clear separation between good and evil. It becomes a more ambiguous area and more challenging for the viewer. And also, the films make us complicit in the criminal activity so that we may think of ourselves as these perfectly respectable people. And sometimes we're made through the trickery of the film to be complicit in a crime scenario. So I would say the moral ambiguity, both within the film and in the watchers of the film is part of
Hmm.
the noir experience.
Interesting. It's interesting bringing the viewer in on that as a complicit element of what actually makes it feel noir. That's
That
you
in
don't hear that
film
often, so
noir,
I like that.
you should see reflections of yourself,
Yeah.
whereas I think that's less likely to happen in the hardcore gangster cycle.
True.
They are
Right.
other. Those characters are other. But a Walter Neff in Double Indemnity, we can
Yeah.
recognize him. We can
Yeah.
understand that character. We can relate to him.
And I think we'll definitely talk about that when we hit the steel trap, which is an interesting
Oh, for
continuation of kind of
sure.
like where we started with Double Indemnity.
For sure.
I want to rewind now and talk a little bit about where it came from. We talked about this a little bit with the war and everything, but obviously it didn't just appear out of nowhere in the mid 1940s. There's kind of like this pipeline feeding into it. You already talked about the gangster films, but when you look at the origins, what else really kind of fed into where we
Well,
landed?
well
I mean,
I would say two things, Andy. Well, you've mentioned one, which is the the style of dialogue, which can be very flippant and cynical, a kind of quick-witted repartee, and
mhm,
that comes from a group of crime writers that the critic Edmund Wilson delightfully named the boys in the back room: Dashiell Hammett and Cornell Woolrich and Raymond Chandler and James M. Cain are the big four in my estimation. And
sure,
they wrote for the Black Mass Crime magazine. They wrote stories about private detectives and crimes in the big city in a hard boiled urban vernacular that had a particularly American rhythm to it. They were all influenced by Ernest Hemingway, by the way, in terms of the simplicity and directness, if I may say, quotes masculinity of the
sure,
prose style. And you get that kind of fast repartee and hard boiled wit in the best of the film noir. And so that's very much an American influence on noir style, but there's a foreign influence,
okay,
which is that of German Expressionism,
sure, yeah,
because there's a historical reason for it. Many of the best directors and most influential directors of film noir were emigres from Germany and Austria during the early rise of fascism. They had, most of them Jewish, had to leave their native countries to save their lives. And some of them went to France first, but the ones that we're dealing with ended up in Hollywood and
right, yeah,
bringing with them the vestiges of the German Expressionist style that was part of their own national and cultural tradition in the countries where they were born. So Fritz Lang and Billy Wilder and Robert Siodmak and Otto Preminger all brought with them elements of the German Expressionist style, which is heavily chiaroscuro, a dark mood, the distortions of expressionism that they had grown up with, which was the national style in a way, and they imported it to Hollywood filmmaking, adjusting uh, German expressionism to the Hollywood grain. It couldn't be as stylized as, say, Fritz Lang's Metropolis. That wouldn't go in Hollywood at the time.
sure, yeah,
It had to be muted, but the expressionist uh, vestiges were there, and you can see them in the film. So you could say that some of the most stylized and stylistic of the film noir had a German expressionist imprint, while the dialogue, the snap of the dialogue, was American vernacular. So it's an interesting confluence of different traditions from different countries.
that's really fascinating. And I love that sense of the blend of the two parts of the world coming together, especially, and I think that's an important note with the filmmakers, these emigre filmmakers coming over from a place where everything felt off kilter, like suddenly, like their entire worldview was
Their
like
worlds
was broken.
collapsed.
Yeah,
Their
right,
worlds were broken. They
yeah,
had to flee for their lives, and they were lucky they got out.
absolutely, yeah,
And
absolutely,
yes, the countries they came from that tradition they were raised in broken. And how could that sense of loss and anxiety not be translated into their work, even
Yeah,
though they were working in happy, prosperous Hollywood?
exactly. Yeah, right, right. I think that speaks a lot to where this came from. Oh, and something else that I think is important to note in the development of noir, and I think this also ties into how these two things blended together. But it's the Hays Code, right? That there's a certain way stories needed to be told, and per the Hays Code, like you couldn't have somebody committing a crime without them having to pay for it, and I think that also
From
kind of becomes
1934
yeah.
to 1967, all Hollywood movies were made under the influence of the Hays Code. If there was a crime, there had to be a punishment.
Yeah.
Not anymore,
Right. Right.
but in the period that we're talking about, absolutely. So going into the films, audiences would have known that none of the criminals would be able to prosper from their crimes.
Yeah.
But we were still fascinated by the films and invested in them anyway, and acting as if we didn't know how it was going to turn out. After all, when you go to see a Greek tragedy, you know how it's going to turn out. The original audiences didn't diminish the impact of the drama or the
No,
tension.
certainly not. Certainly not. It is interesting though that the way that the crimes are punished in these film noir stories, like it ends up fitting perfectly into what like you didn't. I can't imagine a happy ending at any of these, right? Like this feels like it fits with what the Hays Code wanted them to be doing.
It certainly satisfies the criteria of the Hays Code, but in truth, sometimes they cheated, and there were qualified happy endings in film noir. It's only the hardcore noir that allow for no redemption, rehabilitation, or quotes happy ending.
Yeah.
You don't always get the dark endings in Hollywood movies. There was a resistance that somehow went against the American grain
Yeah.
to have a situation where you couldn't possibly win or overcome obstacles. The hardcore criminals always got punished, but
Yeah.
people who got stained by crime or involved in the crime against their will, there might be some recuperation for them in some films.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to talking more about that point specifically when we look at the steel trap, because I think we definitely see that there. Well, with those origins in mind, we can start seeing how noir evolves across the 10 films we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the trajectory, but before we do, we're going to take a quick break and look at how noir evolves across the 40s and 50s. Okay, so noir, it doesn't stay fixed in this period. There's a mutation. It changes. It's ever evolving over this period we're looking at. As we move from the 40s into the late 50s, what do you see as the biggest shifts in this style?
Well, a general shift is from the studio centered noir of the high 40s. The films were by and large shot in the studio,
Yeah.
to the increasing location shooting of the 50s.
Oh, okay.
So I would say there was an influence of the Italian neorealist school, right
Yeah.
immediately following the war,
Right, right.
a grainy on location shooting style that filtered into American films of the late 40s and 50s of different genres, not only film noir, but certainly film noir, where the look of the film was less German expressionist influence than it had been in the high 40s, to something that was set more recognizably in a real world. In other words, from studio to location, from high stylization to a greater amount or greater level of um, Hollywood realism. And the conduit and the influencer there was the Italian neo-realist school, which had a great influence on American filmmaking, more than I think is often recognized. So I would say
Interesting.
that's
Yeah.
one broad change
Okay.
from the 40s to the 50s.
That's an interesting one. I mean, it certainly is noticeable as you go through and watch these films, especially if you're watching them chronologically. But yeah, I don't know if I thought about that specifically as one of those specific moments, although it really is there. Um, what about a like one thing that I was noticing is like it certainly felt more early on that we're seeing that ordinary man slipping into crime. And as it evolves, especially by the we get to those late 50s, it feels it's much harsher. There's more paranoia, more I don't know institutional collapse. Would you say that that's kind of something that we're also seeing over the course, where it's going less from an individual story to more of a widespread disease, I guess we can call it?
I'm not sure I'd go along with that. I
Oh,
think
okay.
I think the paranoia is there right from the beginning of
Hmm.
noir, and I think the attack on institutions probably comes at a later date than the period that we're talking about. If I can give an example from an adjacent genre,
Yeah.
in class yesterday, I showed an absolute masterpiece of the 1950s, which you probably know, Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Certainly.
And at the end of the film, they call the FBI in Washington.
Right.
And the implication is that once we reach the FBI, our problem will be on the road to being solved.
Yeah.
In
Right.
other words, in 1956, calling the FBI was a recipe for a quotes happy ending. Whereas if you call the FBI today, you might feel you're really in trouble
Yeah.
because
Right.
our faith in our
Little
institutions
different. Yeah.
ever since Watergate has diminished, diminished, diminished.
Yeah.
But in the 50s, the faith in the institutional structures that kept the country going, I think, was still pretty solid.
Well, I guess I was specifically maybe thinking, putting too much weight maybe on Touch of Evil and Quinlan and the corruption within the detective, like the police in as an institution, and how they were, how he was managing things on the border.
Well, yes, of course that's true, but there were corrupt officials from the beginning of noir.
Yeah,
I mean, corruption was widespread. But yes,
gotcha.
that's certainly true about Touch of Evil. But I would be reluctant to paint that with a broad brush about the
Okay,
period.
okay.
I, I that my students were amazed that calling the FBI was going to solve a problem at the
Right.
end of the 50s. And I said, well, that was their solution to finding a happy ending to
Yeah,
a story that doesn't have one.
yeah.
Uh, that wouldn't work now. So I would say, from our point of view now, institutions were still pretty much intact during the period of what we now call classic noir, early 40s, late 50s.
Where do you feel the change in mood with the Cold War? Do you feel that shifted anything within noir over this kind of the mid 40s to the
Oh,
late 50s?
absolutely. Absolutely. The Cold War, and especially the Cold War as it was expressed through the Hollywood blacklist,
Mm,
had a dampening effect on movies. And while the films of the time didn't make many direct dramatizations of the blacklist per se, the sense of distrust and paranoia and fear of the other, a neighbor, a husband, a wife could turn you in or might be a communist. That social paranoia, which was very much a part of the blacklist period, was filtered into movie making of all kinds.
yeah.
I mean, people think of the 50s as this anodyne period of Father Knows Best and Ozzie and Harriet. And as I discuss in my book, Hollywood and the movies of the 50s, anything other that was not anything close to the truth. It was a period of great distrust and uncertainty in which you could be called out for your political beliefs. Your livelihood could be ended because you signed the wrong document.
Mm,
I mean, the political divisions and the political opposition was so intense, and that fed into an atmosphere of widespread distrust and distrust in the self,
yeah. Right, right.
as well as the distrust in the other.
Quick note: uh, I think that you might be moving your phone periodically while you're talking. If you when you're doing that, it's creating some static.
I
Um,
haven't touched it.
oh, okay, or something on your desk when you were moving
I, I,
something.
I I may be gesturing too much.
Uh,
I'm touching my desk.
okay, okay. Well, there, yeah, something. It's just created a little static. It was one of your lines kind of got muddied a little bit, but I think we'll be okay. As far as sticking with the Cold War for a second, I'm curious where you feel like the atomic age creeps in. I mean, I certainly feel like when you're talking about something like Kiss Me Deadly, there's a sense of this apocalypse. Is that something that you see in film noir often?
No, no. Kiss Me Deadly, I think, is an exception. That we can call that apocalypse noir or atomic noir.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few. Split Second is another one. There are a few. But
Interesting.
anxiety over atomic energy, the atomic bomb, scientific advancement, that's filtered into science fiction movies and not specifically into film noir. There are a few examples, Kiss Me Deadly being the most prominent and artful of them. But I
Sure. Yeah.
wouldn't make that connection between fear of science and scientific advancement and the uncertainties of the noir universe.
Interesting. Okay. That's good to know.
That's science fiction. And as such,
Yeah.
the 50s was a great period of science fiction movies. We didn't have
Oh,
them
yeah.
before that.
Right. We definitely talked about that quite a bit last in the last episode because I mean, just seeing how it evolved and the changes in it, I think is a fascinating element. All right. Well, let's jump into the movies. We're going to start with Double Indemnity. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder of how this episode is structured. We're moving chronologically through 10 noir titles, starting from 1944 to 1958. Five of the films will anchor the main episode: Double Indemnity, Scarlet Street, Out of the Past, Kiss Me Deadly, and Touch of Evil. For members, we will extend the conversation to include Detour, In a Lonely Place, Sudden Fear, The Steel Trap, and Sweet Smell of Success. So the full arc of noir's evolution is there in one place. And even if noir resists definition, these films should certainly show us what it feels like. Again, if you would like to access the extended version, you can join at truestory.fm/join. When we return, we'll start at the beginning with Double Indemnity. All right, let's jump into the movies. Double Indemnity, 1944, directed by Billy Wilder. This story follows an insurance salesman who falls for a client's wife and agrees to help her murder her husband, only to find that the perfect crime immediately begins to collapse under suspicion and guilt. This really kind of sets a template in many ways for the foundation of what noir is. We have an ordinary man. You've talked about that already. Seduced into crime. You've talked about that already. Desire becomes the trap. Guilt becomes the engine. You have written about this as like a quintessential noir narrative. As what makes Walter Neff such a defining noir figure right out of the gate?
I think the essential question in all of film noir is this one. Why does Walter Neff do what he does?
Yeah, it's a good question.
That's the essential question for all of noir. Here is this middle class man. He's a good executive at his insurance company. He lives a quiet, regulated life. He may be a bit repressed. He's not married, but this doesn't seem to be anything wrong with him.
Right.
He's this law abiding, hard-working, decent man, played, after all, by the decent Fred McMurray, who did not want the part because he thought it would tarnish his image. He
Yeah.
was a nice guy, Mr. Fred McMurray. And after all, in the 50s and 60s, he had a hit TV series, My Three Sons. Nothing could be
Exactly.
more
Yeah. Right.
anodyne or innocent than that family friendly series. So Fred McMurray wasn't a film noir tough guy. He didn't have the iconography of a Humphrey Bogart, who looked like he could be up to something bad at all times. He was
Yeah.
this
Right. Right.
decent, ordinary fellow. He didn't want the part. He resisted it. And of course, it's the part for which he's most remembered. His place in film history is altered because he did accept uh, playing Walter Neff, and he's terrific in it. I think
Oh yeah,
irreplaceable.
absolutely.
And his niceness is an irreplaceable part of the construct of the film. How does Fred McMurray, this really decent guy, somebody we could absolutely relate to and like, and maybe even feel that we know somebody like him, maybe it's a reflection of ourselves. Why does he agree to enter this scheme with this nutcase woman? And it's clear from the beginning what she's up to.
Right.
And he does. And that's the secret of Film Noir. Because I think the film intuits that this nice, decent man has some antisocial edges to him. He's in competition with his father figure Keys. So there's an Oedipal conflict going on. He wants to overturn the father or prove his superiority to the father. He loves the father, but he also wants to overthrow him.
Mm-hmm.
He's very attracted to the woman wrapped in a sheet at the beginning or a towel, and then she walks down the stairs with that anklet. Attractive woman, he falls for her, sure. But he does what he does despite his superficial, socially adjusted personality because he has a touch of larceny. And that's what draws most audiences into film noir, that we see in these movies with a character like Walter Neff a reflection of our own touch of larceny.
Yeah.
But if we take out our antisocial impulses by watching them being expressed by Walter Neff, it's a vicarious experience, and he relieves us from acting antisocially on our own. It relieves us from getting into schemes like poor Walter Neff does.
Exactly. Right.
It's a vicarious release. I guess movies operate in an essential way in that form across genres.
Oh
Movies
yeah.
offer us vicarious experiences we can't have for ourselves, and in this case, dare not have for ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. There
So
is a
it becomes
yeah.
and it becomes a an acting out of a deeply rooted antisocial impulse, which probably, if we're honest, most people at some level have.
I think
Going
that's
against the system. Even though we're in the system and we follow the system, at some level we may want to rebel against it. But this allows us to do so safely. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And it's actually interesting when you say it like that because I feel like in some capacity you could also see the same you could look at her through that same lens, right? She ostensibly hasn't tried any crime as far as we know, and this is an opportunity that she also feels like, hey, maybe let me just try this out and see if I can get away with this. I don't
Well,
want to spin too
that
much on
that
the femme fatale,
no no that
the
no
twist of
you're
that, but I
you're
think
you're being too kind to her because in the novel, the James M. Cain novel,
yeah.
the character is a serial killer.
Okay, that's a change.
Yes, she's a serial killer, and they softened it for the film. And mind you, nobody wanted to play that part either, except for Barbara Stanwyck. She said,
Yeah.
"I don't care if people hate me. It's a great part, and I'll play it." She didn't have to be loved. You can't imagine Katharine Hepburn taking on a part like that because she always needed to be loved.
Yeah, right.
Barbara Stanwyck didn't need our love. And she's amazing in the role. Got an Oscar nomination, but she didn't win Oscars for playing nutcases like Phyllis Dietrichson.
Yeah, right. Well, okay, and then we're also, I mean, in Phyllis, let's just talk about it here because we're very firmly establishing the femme fatale as another element of noirs with her character here, and we'll certainly continue that as we talk about the next film, Scarlet Street, with Kitty. Why, like, how central is this moment of how they shape this femme fatale, this character, in early identity, as far as like where it's going to go in the noir films from here.
Oh, it's crucial, and it does supply ammunition to viewers and critics who detect in film noir a misogynistic strain, because sexual women are shown almost always as dangerous to the unwary male. That sex and desire are threatening to male dominance and self-control. So in some ways the films are warnings to the potentially slipping male viewer. Watch out what you do. If you're married, stay married.
Yeah.
Stay home. Don't venture out. In some ways, you can think of the films as providing a kind of social containment. Stay where you are.
Right. That does feel very 50s post-war. It feels of
Very
the
much
time,
so.
certainly. Yeah.
Yes.
We're also seeing other elements that very much kind of reflect the stylistic elements of what we're going to be seeing through noir from here. We've got a voiceover confession. Like that voiceover is pretty common in noirs. The flashback structure also. The shooting style. You've already talked a little bit about kind of the shadows and the Venetian blinds and the banisters and the stairs
When
and like these
when Walter
elements.
Neff first walks into the Dietrichson living room and the room is bathed in shadows, it's
Yeah.
a visual sign that this man is already in trouble.
He's already entered the
He's entered the
danger
underworld.
zone. Yeah,
He's
exactly.
entered the
Yeah.
noir whirlpool, the noir maze. He's
Yeah.
already gone there. He's
Yeah.
trapped.
Yeah. And it's a sense like of a man narrating his own fall. Like this is a thread that we'll have in these films of that, and I think that's such an interesting element that that speaks to kind of a fatalism, right? This
Absolutely.
recognition that was there ever a sign that this was a story that he could have escaped this
No, the fatalism is ingrained from
from
the
the
first
beginning?
image of the film.
Yeah, yeah,
He's a doomed man from the beginning. And in terms of using the narration, the story's already happened. He's telling us about what's already happened. So, whether consciously or not, we're looking at these images as something already done. In other words, there's a sense of predestination or fatality that hovers over the image, the absence of agency and free will, which fits into what we were talking about noir paranoia and sense of defeat. Walter Neff doesn't have a chance from the first shot of the film. The story ends with his destruction. And then we
yeah,
see the destruction working out. Sunset Boulevard ends with the corpse of the hero of the film,
right,
or the anti hero.
yeah,
And so his doom is ingrained over the image from the very beginning. Both Billy Wilder films, by the way, and both
yeah, yeah.
essential film noir.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's move into Scarlet Street, which twists that same logic into something even more humiliating and psychologically corrosive. Fritz Lang's Scarlet Street centers on a mild mannered cashier and amateur painter who becomes entangled with a younger woman and her boyfriend, falling into a spiral of deception, exploitation, and murder. This film, again, ordinary man tempted into crime. This one, though, you've got this emotional element of it where he's kind of completely broken by his desire, by this fantasy he's created in Kitty, and a lot of it is the self delusion that he has through this. Um, Fritz Lang, obviously, I've talked about him way back in the German Expressionism episode that I did. But what is he bringing to a film like this that makes it feel harsher or perhaps, I don't know, more pitiless than Double Indemnity?
Well, Fritz Lang, who was not the most popular man in Hollywood, by the way,
Hmm.
uh,
Interesting.
liked, one feels a kind of aloofness from The devastation that he visits on his characters, it's almost as if the director is taking a certain enjoyment in watching the destruction of the figures that he sets up. And he does watch poor Criss Cross's downfall with a detachment and lack of pity or empathy, which is very unnerving and meant to be, and part of the power of the film.
Right.
Mr. Lang was not a humanist. He was a
It
very
shows.
difficult man and with a very strange background. Um, I can't prove it, but there were rumors that he actually murdered one of his wives. Um, he fabricated a lot of what happened to him in Germany. He was enormously talented,
Yeah.
but in some ways a tormented figure, and that torment is ingrained in the mise en scène of a film like Scarlet Street. But for me, the essential noir element of Scarlet Street occurs at the very beginning. Criss Cross is a man of regular habits. He takes the same walk home every night after work. This night, he goes one block out of the way. He changes his daily routine and he meets Kitty and he's finished.
Hmm.
So that, the sense of a chance encounter, the sense of mischance, of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, of bad luck, bad timing, all of these elements form part of a lot of noir scenarios, never more effectively than in this film. A
Yeah.
man of absolute habits changes his habits one night. He goes one block in a different direction, and his life is overturned completely.
That's a fascinating shift, and especially, it made me think of something like Brief Encounter, which also deals with a similar story, but it's a much more positive, and there's a sense of romance, and I mean certainly
Yes,
heartbreak and
that
everything. But
that that's not a film noir. That's
no, right?
an
But
optimistic view of change your patterns and wonderful things might happen to you. In film
yeah,
noir, change your pattern and look what could happen to you.
right. That's exactly where we are with these, and I think that's fascinating. It definitely
Again,
shifts.
as I was saying with Walter, the message to Walter Neff is, boy, you should have taken one look at that ankle coming down that anklet and said, I'm out of here.
Yeah, right.
And poor Criss Cross should have he should have kept going home the same way every night.
Same way every night, man. The thing that I find fascinating about this story is how it really is this story of a collapse and humiliation of him as this figure. I mean, Walter Neff confesses to Keyes at the end of Double Indemnity, but here it's like a complete psychological breakdown that we have Christopher Cross, and how he has been completely trapped by his draw into this and the crimes that he ends up committing, and it breaks him completely. And I think like that's an interesting shift from going from Double Indemnity to this, that we see like the complete breaking of a man.
But in Double Indemnity, Walter Neff has been wounded, and he very likely will not live.
Oh, sure, sure, sure.
And
Yeah,
Criss Cross is alive at the end
yeah.
and uncaught, but trapped forever.
Trapped forever.
He can never
Exactly.
get out of the noir maze, and in fact, not having any options or not having any way out is his existential punishment. I mean,
Mm.
it's a very cruel ending. He's
Yo,
alive
yeah.
and unpunished, and nothing could be more cruel to this man. He can't get out of the trap that he's been forced into.
And I think that
Desire is forced him into it.
Yeah, and I think Lang has a visual style that he uses in this to really kind of emphasize that sense of entrapment and really kind of this moral claustrophobia, and the way that he shapes the story. And I think that's an important part. And I see that a lot with Lang's films. And perhaps that's that coldness, the way that you were talking about how Lang
The
approaches the
detachment,
stories.
the
Yeah.
detachment.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
he likes to make his characters squirm. He sets them in situations where they're uh, forced into increasing elements of discomfort, and he watches dispassionately, but with some sense of secret delight or amusement. A sadist.
Yeah. It's a dark story. Are you seeing much in the change of the femme fatale from Phyllis to Kitty from one film to the next?
Kitty's more vulnerable.
Hmm.
Joan Bennett is a less formidable character than Barbara Stanwyck. I would rather spend time with Joan Bennett than Barbara Stanwyck. Uh, she seems more accessible.
Yeah.
Barbara Stanwyck is encased behind that coldness and resolve and strength. Uh, Joan Bennett is far more vulnerable, seductive, charming. You can see why Chris is drawn to her, but herself very vulnerable.
Is there a sense? I'm curious as far as the nature of the femme fatale in this film, when so much of who she is and what she like, how she leads Chris down this path, is because of her relationship with Johnny, Dan Durier's character, who is a criminal, and we, that's how we see Chris meet the two of them. Is he's beating her in the street. Chris, hits him over the head and takes her to get out of there. But we find out that it's actually a relationship. How much of
It's a
it?
relationship, but remember, Kitty needs a partner, and Johnny pushes her into these scenarios. He's the leader. Phyllis doesn't need anybody. She's on her own.
Yeah,
She's the more formidable rival,
she's
and
the
she's
yeah.
the she's a strategist who is operating on her own. Kitty needs a partner, and her partner controls her. Her desire weakens her in the way that Walter Neff's desire and Chris Cross's desire weakens them. But Kitty is a desiring figure. Phyllis desires nobody but herself,
Yeah.
and so therefore far less vulnerable. She's amazed at the end when she says, "I actually felt something for a moment for you. I've never done that for anybody in my life." That's not true of Kitty.
Yeah.
You feel that she can have very strong feelings for somebody. She's crazy about Johnny.
Yeah. True.
She's
True.
she's wildly attracted to him, as Chris is crazily wildly attracted to her.
An interesting characterization that we have with Chris is his relationship with his wife, as far as the way that he seems, I don't know, demasculinized. He's coming in with the apron and doing the cooking and everything. Is that just a further pushing down of the male figure in the
Yes,
noir stories?
yes, it is. Nobody's masculinity is more challenged or undermined than that of Chris Cross in Scarlet Street. And after all, he's married to a tyrant played by a wonderful actress named Rosalind Ivan, known popularly, by the way, as Ivan the Terrible.
Oh, really?
She always played these shrewish, shrill wives. Nobody did it better.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I love it. I think that's an interesting relationship, and I love that element of the story, and it's certainly something that we see even outside of noir. I'm thinking of the father figure in Rebel Without a Cause as another example. Like, we're still seeing that sort
And
of.
he's in an apron at a certain point, too, isn't
That's what
he?
I'm saying, right? Yeah, like we're seeing that kind of continued demasculization in this period, and
And
I think
that's
that's
one of the
fascinating.
points that historians of noir always make, that the films represent taking the traditional the American all-conquering hero off his pedestal, making him have less agency. It's like a rewriting of gender way before we became so conscious of gender ideology, because the heroism in film noir is very hard to accomplish. It's
Yeah,
very hard to both attain and sustain, because the male characters are undermined progressively by their own desires, their own weaknesses, and by the formidable femme fatales of the 1940s.
sure. Yeah, yeah. All right, let's move into Detour, which strips noir down even further into pure fatalism, where doom feels almost arbitrary. Edgar G. Ulmer's Detour follows a down on his luck pianist hitchhiking to California, whose attempt at a fresh start turns into a bleak chain of accidents, impersonations, and escalating doom. This film, and we're looking into. You mentioned kind of the studios and what we were seeing. This is the Poverty Row example of what we're getting with noir, and everything seems rigged against our protagonist. I think this is a fascinating one. You've cited this as one of the purest expressions of noir fatalism, and I'm just wondering what makes it feel so relentlessly doomed, especially when you compare it to the bigger studio noirs.
But part of it is the way the film is set up. There's absolutely no way out for the protagonist, and the
Right.
protagonist is played by an actor we don't know very well. He didn't have much of a career, who projects a masculine authority, but also an inner weakness. There's a helplessness about that character. From the minute you see him, you know he's in a B movie, and the B movie, the Poverty Row, saturates the film at every level. But the Poverty Row absence, the sense of absence, makes the character's defeat inevitable from the beginning. With Fred McMurray and a rich production design in Double Indemnity, does that character, if you just looked at it visually in terms of movement and presence of the actor, does that character have a chance? Yes. Does Tom Neal, a Poverty Row actor who looks defeated and forlorn in Detour, have a chance? Not for a second.
Never did he have that chance.
Never.
This movie, I'm curious because we talked about kind of like there's always crime in noir, and this film, I don't know. I think it's interesting. There's so much bad luck and just kind of circumstantial sorts of situations. Does noir sometimes suggest that guilt and punishment don't require a moral cause, just a circumstance?
it, it I think it's almost more than that. It's as if the the guilt of the characters is deeply ingrained and can't be disconnected from them. You know, the characters are deeply unlucky, and that lack of luck is connected to their lack of morality. They're characters in a B movie. They're not held to the same standards as characters in A films.
Yeah.
And the the thin characterization, these characters don't have any of the complexity of what we've been talking about in the first two films.
No, not at all. I think that it's such an interesting story that we have here because we certainly have, this femme fatale that he'll end up picking up as a hitchhiker to kind of continue his ride over to California. But in so many ways, like I just find it to be so interesting because he is himself hitchhiking. He catches this ride, and by circumstance, the owner of the car, uh, you know, falls asleep. He tries to get him out of the door, and the guy just falls out, hits his head on a rock, and dies. Like that just seems like the most just circumstantial of elements, and I guess that's what I find so fascinating about it, especially as it leads into the woman. And this is like I love the noir web that is woven before he even gets into this car, because that woman that he's going to pick up has already hitched a ride with this guy that he's with. That driver has already kind of like come onto her, and she's clawed him, and so he's got the claw marks. And now she thinks that he killed the guy, and so he's suddenly is trapped in this situation of complete circumstance. And I just think that's so dark.
It, this poor character is enmeshed in a scenario in which there's no way out for him.
No.
No way out. He's doomed. And we watch the working out of his doom, and it's inevitable. It's fated. Talk about lack of agency, lack of free will. I don't think any film noir shows it more forcefully than Detour. No free will here. There's some
No.
evil destiny hovering over this character, and you know what? He hasn't got a chance.
I also love, this is another example of the narration that we have through noir. We start with him reflecting on all of this as he's sitting in a coffee shop, and then we kind of flash back and see how he got here. And what I love about it is part of it feels confessional, part of it feels like is he justifying it in some way as to like why he ended up here and like this is where I deserve to be, or is it just him trying to like find meaning in the chaos of this of the world and just like this is the reality and I'm trapped in it and it's inevitable. And again, going back to the fatalism that we've talked about so often.
I think we are aware of his fatalism. I don't think the character has that kind of awareness or self-knowledge.
Yeah.
We know, and we
We
know
can see
far
it.
more than he does. He doesn't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
He's going from moment to moment, but we see the arc of his doom, and it's inevitable.
It's such a great film. Did I'm just curious, like did Ulmer or Neil, did they continue in other noirs? Are they names that pop up more in the noir circles?
Tom Neal had a very minor career after that. I think he had many personal issues that got in his way, and
Yeah.
Ulmer was relegated forever to B minus filmmaking. He never had a shot at an A film. He was a poverty row worker from beginning to end, and
Always.
it's almost as if by accident he made this film that posterity has said is a classic film noir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody at the time thought they were making a film that you'd be talking about 60, 70, 80 years later. They
Right.
were making a disposable B minus, C plus, D minus, lowercase crime movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
I think that
happens to be made with artistry and force, and it speaks to us now, all these years later. It wasn't released as anything. It was just a second feature, disposable.
yeah, and I think that speaks to like how I first saw it was a really crappy public domain version that was out there, and I think only as you're saying, it's been recognized as such and finally it's been given like the 4K treatment and the restoration and everything and people have
But
finally come to
Anne
see it.
Savage, the star, she did live long enough to become aware that this film was considered a classic.
Oh,
And
good.
she appeared at film noir festivals, and she was given ovations, and it was thrilling to see, because when she made it, she had no idea that this film was going to be her one shot at posterity.
Yeah, right. Right.
And then, but unlike Tom Neal, who died young, Anne Savage had a long life, and she lived long enough to be aware of the tributes made for this film, and of the power of her performance.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that because yeah, that's nice to see that she got to see that with her own career.
She got full recognition,
Yeah.
and she was amazed by it, and of course grateful for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally
Sure.
unexpected.
Yeah.
When they were making it, they had no idea they were making a classic.
That's right.
None.
Yeah. As
And
often
what
is the
was it
case with
made
any of this
for
stuff. Yeah.
for $1.98 in 6 days?
Yeah. No one would have expected.
Nobody.
Well, let's move on to one of noir's most defining romantic labyrinths, Out of the Past, where the past itself becomes the inescapable trap. This is Jacques Tourneur's film from 1947. It follows a former private detective who has tried to disappear into a quiet small town life, only to be pulled back into a web of betrayal, obsession, and unfinished business from his past. This is really, in some way, fatalism at its peak, right? We've got this inescapable trap in the past where love and memory are forms of doom rather than refuge. This, I think, in one of your books, you said that this is one of noir's purest statements that the past isn't backstory, it's destiny. I kind of love that idea because it just you really feel like Robert
I mean,
Mitchum's character. You'll never get out of this.
the past, in effect, is a character, or the past is fate with a capital F, destiny with a capital D, and it's come to claim him. It doesn't matter that he's rebuilt his life and he lives in this beautiful sylvan rural community that doesn't seem to have a touch of noir attached to it.
No, right,
And
right.
yet noir comes to claim him and brings him back into its maze and labyrinths from which there's no escape.
And I think that it's important to reflect on that just because I think there's as noir comes in, you can see how it ends up affecting the people in the town that otherwise, like you said, feels more idyllic. You know, like Jeff's friend, the deaf kid, ends up actually having to help him take down one of the
Yes.
people, like ends up committing murder. And so I think that's, you can see that darkness kind of seeping in, or is maybe it's more appropriate to say staining the town, right?
It stains the town, and of
Yeah.
course, once the past with a capital P comes to claim him, he cannot participate in the restoration because the film ends with a sense of redemption. His beautiful girlfriend is going to have a happy, normal life in
Yeah.
this town. But for Jeff, there's no chance of being reinstated. There's
Yeah.
no chance of being redeemed. What he's done in the past comes to claim him, and it's inescapable. But he's also trapped by his desire, isn't he, for this woman who comes in out of the sun baked plaza in Mexico in the white dress. For many people, that is the quintessential noir image of Jane Greer coming out of the sun into the shadows of the bar in
Yeah.
Mexico. A fabulous image of the femme fatale, so attractive, so seductive. Of course, he's drawn to her. She's this
Yeah.
charming, beautiful woman, but she's also fate, and a
Absolutely.
very dark one, very dark fate. He
Yeah.
can't escape it.
No, no, absolutely
Neither
not.
can she, by the way.
Yeah, right. True. She's just as much embroiled in this as he is. Like they're both trapped in this web.
She can't
Yeah.
get out. What I have to say, Andy, one of the reasons this is not one of my favorite films is when he's called back into the present to do this deal for the Kirk Douglas character in San
Yeah.
Francisco, the plot becomes so confused about the insurance and the two secretaries. I can't follow it. I simply cannot follow it. Don't ask me what happens. I don't know. And
Yeah.
what I can't answer is the narrative confusion deliberate and a reflection of something existential about noir destiny, or is it poor plotting? But I cannot follow it.
That's interesting because I don't think the film was remade in the early 80s as Against All Odds, and I don't think that they smoothed that out. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I think it still is fairly convoluted as memory
So
serves.
convoluted.
Yeah, yeah.
Every time I see it, I sort of A, give up trying to solve it, and B, I frankly lose interest. So
It's
it's not one of my favorite films. Let's move on.
yeah.
It's not one of my
well,
favorites.
okay, but I do want to talk about Robert Mitchum because you in your books you definitely focus on the stars and the faces that became known and part of these styles and movements. And I think Robert Mitchum in many ways feels, I don't know, certainly to me feels like quintessential noir. There's something that's very cool about his presence. He has kind of like this somnambulistic quality as he kind of like sleepwalks through everything. And I just wonder like how much of Mitchum, how much of the sense of what we're pulling out of the film is Mitchum, because he feels so right at home in this world.
Oh, he was the perfect film noir anti-hero.
Yeah.
Uh, and interestingly, there's a combination of strength and weakness in his persona. You can see that he could fall for the femme fatale and that he might not have the wherewithal to stand up against her ultimately. He has great sexual charisma, but also vulnerability. There's a strength and a vulnerability in Mitchum's persona that make him absolutely right for film noir. I would say he's number one film noir actor, and perhaps Barbara Stanwyck number one film noir actress. And
Yeah.
they were in a lot of good films.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Out of curiosity, since this isn't one of your favorite noirs, what would you say is your favorite film noir that has Robert Mitchum at the
Well,
center?
hands down, Night of the Hunter,
Okay.
which is his greatest performance, and beyond that, one of the
Yeah.
greatest of all performances by a male actor I've ever seen in a Hollywood film. That's a masterpiece.
That's a great film. That is really
That's a
good.
great film, and that's
Yeah.
Mitchum's finest hour.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, there's such an interesting tone through that film that's very fable. It's like a fable. I like the way that Lawton directed.
And
It's
again, that the
beautiful.
strength and the weakness that I talked about in Mitchum. Yes, he's a figure of evil destiny, but he's also vulnerable. He can be conquered, and he is.
Yeah.
You get with Mitchum a sense of strength, but also that he can be defeated.
Right.
And
Right.
perhaps
Right.
that comes from his own extreme personal problems. I mean, he had substance and alcohol abuse problems that really destroyed his career and destroyed his life ultimately, that he didn't control.
Hmm.
So you get the sense of a man who has all these gifts, and yet there's something within him that cannot be controlled. In Film Noir, that serves the anti-hero character perfectly. That
Yeah.
combination.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that I can see all of that with him, even outside of the noir performances. I think it's just something that Mitchum carries in himself as an
Absolutely.
actor.
It
Yeah,
was inescapably part of his iconography.
definitely. All right. In our next chapter, Noir is going to turn inward, away from criminal conspiracies and toward the volatility of the human psyche itself. When we return, we're looking at In a Lonely Place. Okay, Nicholas Ray's 1950 film In a Lonely Place follows a troubled
Uh,
Hollywood
can we
screenwriter. Oh,
take
yeah.
a break? Can we
Yeah,
take a break?
absolutely. Yep. Perfect timing. Okay.
Yeah. Can we take about 10 minutes?
10-minute break. Sure. Everybody
Okay.
who is watching will be right back.
Okay. Because are we off?
No, I'm just going to hold on. Yeah, go ahead. Hey, Foster. I am back in here just checking to see if you are ready. You're muted. Your microphone is muted. I can't hear you. Nope, still can't hear you. I wonder if it's that phone situation again. You can type in the chat if that helps. I also sent you a text. Okay, hold on. If I put it in the chat, does that help, or should I email it to you so it's on your phone? I'm going to email it as well. Oh, now you're in twice. But I still can't hear you. Oh, now I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, you should be able to hang up on one of those because I have two of you in here now.
So should I close my phone down?
I guess we can leave it. I mean, it should be fine. If I don't want to disconnect it if that's where the audio is coming from.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I've got a feedback though. I hear myself twice.
Oh, then yeah, you do want to close one of those down.
How about
I'm still seeing both of you in here. Going to here, I can boot one of you. Let me boot you out of there. Okay, how about now? Are you hearing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear yourself?
Yes, but I can't see myself.
Oh, interesting. Are you on the? Do you have the screen open with both of us?
I don't see a thing.
Well, I mean, obviously you're connected to it because I see you. I wonder if it's just a different tab on your computer.
I can see now.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes.
But I'm ×2.
Still?
On my screen I'm ×2.
Oh, so maybe it's because you opened up a second tab. If you close one of those tabs, you should be fine. Because I only have one of you now on my end. I mean, it's recording fine. So if you want to go ahead, we can go ahead. But if it's distracting to you, we can get it sorted out real quick.
What do I do to close out one of these?
I guess I'm not exactly sure.
I see two pictures of us side by side.
What browser are you using? Are you in Chrome or
Chrome?
Okay. If you go up to Window, and then on the drop down at the bottom of that window, it should show you how many windows you have open. Do you see multiples down there? Of where it would be like the next real Film Noir Coda? Or the next, sorry, StreamYard Studio, I guess is what it would say. I mean, do you want to just try like hitting the X in the corner of one of them and see if it, um, since you have two of them, you should just be able to hit that little red X in the top corner to close a window.
If I leave the site,
If you end up leaving the site, just go back to that link and then come back in. Guess that's what happened. Just hang tight, everybody. We're figuring out some of the technical. There he is. There you are.
okay, I've got two images again. Let's just continue.
Okay, we'll just roll with it. All right. Okay. In a Lonely Place, 1950, directed by Nicholas Ray. This film follows a troubled Hollywood screenwriter who becomes a murder suspect. And as suspicion closes in, a new romance offers the possibility of stability until his own volatility threatens to destroy it. This is a shift that we're getting here. The danger isn't a criminal scheme or a femme fatale, but really it's the instability of this man. And I don't know, is there a fear of intimacy? But it certainly is a psychological break that we're seeing in the movie. It's not necessarily the underworld, it's more about masculinity and rage. And I'm curious for you, what makes this film seem a turn in the cycle? And is it a pivotal turn?
I wouldn't call it a pivotal turn, but I would say it is a revealing one, and I think you identified it, and that is this film focuses on the psyche of the protagonist exclusively, and everything is driven by his own emotional and moral shortcomings and challenges. So the focus is on the Bogart character and
Yeah.
the psychology of the character. And by the way, it's Bogart's favorite performance.
Really?
It's his own favorite among his films, and I can see why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everything is dependent on what he projects. It's all about his character, and his character drives all the action. A character who cannot control himself.
Well, and I think it's important to talk about Bogart. You know, we didn't bring up Maltese Falcon. A lot of people kind of say that that's kind of either the start of noir or like a proto noir that leads into where noir is going to go. And obviously, Bogart's a huge part of that, and certainly associated with his toughness and the control and that kind of detective tone that he would have in those sorts of films.
The thing about Bogart is the tone
Yeah.
and the rhythm that he used for Sam Spade set the mold for so many film noir to follow.
Yeah.
That he, just as the Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler set the mold for the hard-boiled writing style, Bogart set the model for how film noir was enacted in the 40s.
Yeah.
With the way he delivered dialogue, with his look, with a sort of somnambulistic quality, but a certain rhythm in the dialogue. He was perfectly cast as Sam Spade, and nobody's ever really touched him in that part again.
Yeah.
For my taste, I'm not really that interested in the private eye stories. I don't like them. Again, the stories get so complicated. I mean, it's so involved. I can't bear The Big Sleep. You know, I don't want to talk about it. I can't follow it. I think it's a total bore. It's a total bore. I think it's a bad film. And so I'm not always crazy about Bogart's films, but I recognize that he set the tone for the 40s. There's a cynicism, a hard-boiled quality, and something also improbable. How could a man who looked like that and sounded like that become an iconic movie star? And he did, unarguably. He's a great movie presence.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not a movie handsome, and he has a funny voice with a kind of sibilance to it. Uh, he's the most improbable of all great movie stars. He doesn't look like one, and yet he is one.
Well, and that's such an interesting shift into this film, right? Because he is playing somebody so against the type that he'd kind of created. There's more. It's more frightening and unstable, and maybe it's just because it is more internal that we're getting with him.
It's internal. It's about a man who can't control himself. And at the end of the film, that great ending, when he walks away, and we don't exactly know what's going to happen to him, but he's certainly in defeat.
Yeah.
His probably his last chance at a close relationship. He's managed to louse up himself, with his uncontrollable temper. So it's all about the psychology of that character, which was a reflection of Bogart in the real world, who had issues with alcoholism and who was famous for uncontrollable outbursts of temper and displays. Um, and he's playing a reflection of himself.
Hmm.
Remember that he produced the film. It was his own production company that produced it. He desperately wanted this film to be made. He recognized that it gave him a showcase for a new kind of characterization.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very interesting shift for him, and I don't know. Is it a shift for noir? Are we moving into where it's taking the dread and moving it into kind of a domestic thing, an intimate space that's not necessarily full of crime?
Well, it takes place in a Hollywood studio
Well,
setting. I
that
don't
and
mean
that's yeah,
Hollywood
and that's
studio. I mean
yeah,
studio apartments or Spanish style studio apartment complex that you would see
yeah, yeah,
then and now in the real Los Angeles.
yeah. Right, but I mean, we're moving inside a like a just a. I mean, it's a story of just a regular guy. I mean, he's a screenwriter. I mean, there's the whole Hollywood element of it, but it's not. There is this whole suspicion of murder that is an element of the story, but it's
And it's
not.
that, but the actual murder gives the film its film noir bona
Yeah,
fides. It's authentically and legitimately and fully a film noir. Our leading character commits no crime.
right,
He
right.
commits moral and emotional crimes, if you will, but he doesn't kill anybody.
Yeah,
He loses his temper, but he doesn't commit a murder. But
well,
there
and
is a murder committed, and that crime
yeah.
hangs over the film. And you think, and we're made to think that this character could have done that.
I think that's such an interesting element with this story that we're following this guy that hasn't done anything, and in a way, you can see the fatalistic connection to something like Detour, where it's just his nature. He's just in this story, but because of the way he is, he's just as trapped as Walter Neff. Right?
Yes.
He's stuck in this situation and can't get out of it.
In this case, character is destiny.
Yeah.
It's not something external that forces him into a noir scenario. It's something coming from inside that makes him a noir victim
Hmm.
and an accomplice and possibly guilty. It's not outside him, it's inside him.
Right. 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 Let's move on to a different kind of noir tension, sudden fear, where marriage becomes the battleground and paranoia takes on a sharply domestic form. This is David Miller's film from 1952. It follows a successful playwright who impulsively marries a younger actor that she had once rejected, only to discover that he and his former lover are plotting her murder for money. This is we're definitely shifting in kind of like there's a domestic melodrama element to this film for sure, and I think that that's an interesting collision that we have here of a romantic drama and a psychological thriller that all kind of ties into this noir. This you brought up as one of your favorites, and I'm curious what's
It
your draw
it
with
is
this one?
it's my all-time favorite film noir
All time,
and one of my
okay.
favorite films, period. I love it. And I push for it to be shown whenever it's shown, and I'm always feel vindicated. Audiences share my enthusiasm for the film. I think it's a great film.
I
A
mean, Joan
great film
Crawford's
on every level. Joan Crawford's finest hour. It doesn't matter if she's Mommy Dearest or was a nutcase in the real world. She was a great technician, and it's evident in this film. That is a drop dead star vehicle performance. Drop dead.
Well, and she's so great, but and then I think you're pairing opposite her. You've got Jack Palance playing this young actor that she ends up marrying, and I think that's an interesting dynamic that you have of watching them is as the film builds. Once she starts suspecting him, I mean, it takes a while for her to realize that
Well,
anything is amiss, which I think
but
is interesting.
Andy, when I show the film, I warn audiences. I said, you if you haven't seen the film, and as you're watching it for about the first 30, 40 minutes, you'll be saying, "What's the matter with that guy? This isn't film noir. It has nothing to do with film noir. This is a romantic melodrama. What are you talking about?" And then noir descends and it
Yeah.
becomes the ultimate film noir. And the last shots of her fleeing through the streets of a deserted downtown San Francisco are masterpieces of noir cinematography, the best I've ever seen, as a matter of fact.
Well, and that's an interesting point because, a number of the films that we've talked about, you've said how from the beginning, there's a fatalist tone that we're seeing in the film, and we
Not
can
here,
already tell, like Walter Neff, we know that he's already doomed. Yeah,
not
this
here,
one's so different. It's such a
not here.
fascinating shift.
It's a fascinating shift because she's a winner.
Yeah,
She's
right.
it's a successful professional playwright. She comes from a fabulously wealthy San Francisco family. She falls for this young man, much younger than she is, somebody she's rejected for the leading role in her new play because he's not handsome or attractive enough, and he seduces her. It's
Yeah.
all Joan Crawford domestic melodrama. And then in that great scene, she hears on the tape that he and his paramour, played unforgettably by the great Gloria Graham, are
Always
out to
great.
get her, to kill her for her money. And the film shifts into noir. And for me, it shows that what I like about noir is that it can descend in the most unlikely and unexpected places. It can invade the life of this wealthy, privileged, seemingly very protected woman. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
in that scene, and then the style of the film changes. When she hears their conspiracy on the tape, the whole style of the film changes with strange angles and chiaroscuro lighting and dramatic music. It becomes full bore, full throttle film noir.
Well, and her performance obviously shifts as she realizes what's going on, and I think that's an element of Joan Crawford I've always enjoyed. Is she's a very physical actress, but in this film, especially in the silent sequences where she's discovering things or moments of fear, and I love how the film builds the suspense. And I'm curious how that works differently in this film than maybe other noirs of building suspense through interiority rather than action.
Well, so much of it in that crucial scene that shifts where the film takes us right in, takes the character and us into noir. It's all her reaction shots. In many ways, it's a silent movie performance, and she started in silent movies.
Yeah.
She knows the technique of signaling emotion through gesture and expression. She doesn't need any dialogue. It's about her own internal reaction to something that is outside her but changes her life and plunges her into noir. I mean, it is a masterpiece of movie star acting. It's not the method. Joan Crawford was a technician. It's all external and all worked out in advance. That's such a meticulous performance. It's like kabuki. It's so
Yeah.
stylized, but it's done with such artistry that it actually goes from external to internal. It's all worked out. It's choreographed.
Yeah.
But she
Right.
does
Right.
it with such conviction that she conveys a sense of her characters in her life.
With Jack Palance opposite her, there's an interesting kind of shift in noirs in the center of this film, center of gravity, by putting her, making her our protagonist. She's not a femme fatale. She's the
No.
endangered protagonist. Is he an homme fatale? Is that like? Do we see the
Yes.
elements? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
he is. Yes, he's the object of desire.
Yeah.
And we can get into gender ideology. After all, Joan Crawford was, quotes, an older woman at that time. And in Hollywood at that time, I suspect to some extent now, an older woman is rarely an object of desire, whereas an older guy can be. But
Mm-hmm.
here, the object of desire is a young man, and his paramour is a young woman, his quotes physical equal. She's older. And so it does, you could fault it for the way it represents age and desire and desirability.
Hmm.
And it's clearly growing older for women marks the woman as a less desirable character. That wouldn't be the case for the man. But here, the terms of desire are shifted.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the man, and he's an odd looking homme fatale.
Yes.
I mean, Jack Palance
Yeah.
was very strange looking, but withal, you could see the attractiveness. Joan Crawford got an Oscar nomination, so did he.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, he's amazing, and Gloria Graham won the Oscar that year for
Did
The
she?
Bad and the Beautiful, but
Oh,
certainly
yeah.
for this film too.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Is this shifting some of the thinking in film noir about some post-war anxieties that circle around marriage, independence, financial power? Are we seeing kind of it stepping into those sorts of anxieties that people had at the time?
I don't know that I would make too much of that. No,
Okay.
I'm not sure. What you said before is relevant. This is
Yeah.
a story about a new noir post-war prototype, the woman in peril.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of films. This is the greatest of them, but there are a lot of films about a woman in peril. And the focus shifts from the man to the woman. And they're
Yeah.
great star vehicles for actresses. There's a terrific little known film noir called Cause for Alarm with Loretta
Okay.
Young, Jeopardy with Barbara Stanwyck, Julie with, of all people, Doris Day, terrific.
Hmm.
Woman on the Run, where the female protagonist is an innocent, totally innocent character, but plunged into a noir scenario.
Well, and I think that
Actually, Joan Crawford's character is innocent. She
right,
made
right.
she made the wrong decision in the guy she married, but she's innocent. But she's thrown into noir, uh, and then has to survive. And all of these films, I guess the prototype is Joan Bennett in Reckless Moment, if you know that Max Ophuls film.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
And thrown into a noir scenario, these seemingly well-adjusted middle-class women, often married, protected by marriage and the family, have to become survivors, and they become very skillful at facing up to noir opposition. And all of them endure. They all succeed.
So that's a real shift in just kind of like the as we talked about earlier, kind of the evolution of noir. This is one of those moments where we start seeing the woman as the woman in peril character
Yes,
in these darker
very,
stories.
very much of a shift. And the
Yeah.
woman in peril is never a femme fatale.
Right. Right.
She's a middle class woman, or in this case, an upper class, a very rich woman, but not a femme fatale, not wicked, not her life isn't involved in crime at all. And then all of a sudden, she's thrown into a situation where she has to deal with criminality and survives.
Yeah. No, I think that's
In a way, you could call these films sort of, in a cracked way, feminist fables. They project the women as victim, and the victim becomes a survivor through her own ingenuity and her ability to stand up to noir misfortune.
I think that's very fascinating. Let's move from this kind of this type of domestic paranoia, and murderous situations, moving to an equally unsettling variation, the steel trap, where middle class stability begins cracking from within. Andrew L. Stone's film from 1952 follows a respectable bank employee who impulsively steals a large sum of money and persuades his wife to flee the country with him, only to find that the pressure of escape and the fear of being caught begins to unravel them both. We're really kind of moving into the suburbs with this one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's a man who has a
Yeah.
very regular life, going from the suburbs to downtown for his job as a bank vice president, and then decides, you know what? I think there's a way that I could steal a cool million from my bank and not be found out.
Right.
And that's the second great question in film noir after why did Walter Neff do what he did? Why did the Joseph Cotton character, whose name I've forgotten for the moment, I should know it, decide to do what he did? Why did this distinguished bank vice president, played by the terminally aristocratic and elegant Joseph Cotton, decide to steal a million from his bank? Why?
Yeah. Well, and what's
He's
fascinating,
not a criminal.
no, and what's interesting is from the beginning, like this is going right back to Walter Neff, like, and Jim Osborne is his name. It goes right, like, from the beginning. He's talking about how normal his life is, and already he's plotting and planning. Like, we walk into this, like, there's not a moment where he's not already processing this in his head.
Absolutely. But what you just said is part of the reason I think the film offers for the choice that he makes. He has a life that's too regular,
Yeah.
that's too planned out, that's too easy in a way, and too routine. And
I mean,
the routine actually begins to seem unnerving to him. Every day to go from the suburbs to downtown, from downtown to the suburbs, like clockwork, in this suburban house with this ideal wife and ideal daughter, and he wants to overturn all of it. He gets bored. Who knows? He gets impatient. He sees an opportunity. Again, he's a character that expresses the touch of larceny that's resident
right.
in each of us, if we're honest.
Well, and I think it's a sense of dissatisfaction, and maybe this is a shift in noir where the dissatisfaction itself is what is dangerous. And I'm curious, because it definitely feels like very Eisenhower era with this one, as far
Very
as just kind of like, and I'm just wondering, is that another shift that we're seeing in the early 50s of starting to see more of these normal families? I mean, Walter Neff is normal, but as we talked about, he's single. He doesn't have kids. This is a family. He's a wife and child.
The Jim Osborne could not be more ordinary, representative, well-behaved, well-regulated, distinguished. Ordinary. He's like the Father Knows Best archetype played by Robert Young in the 50s series that I loved as a kid. He's a character type that audiences in the 50s would immediately recognize as, quotes, one of us.
Yeah.
Not remotely a criminal, played by this elegant movie star named Joseph Cotton.
He's fantastic.
He does it because he's bored with his routine, because there's a touch of larceny within, and because he thinks he can get away with it. But the fascinating thing about this film is at the end, when he puts back the money just in the nick of time, he is so happy to return to his routine.
Yeah.
In other words, what this film demonstrates as effectively as any other film that I know of is the lesson that's taught to us at the end of Wizard of Oz. A place like home.
Absolutely. Right.
He is so happy to go back to his routine, and Jim Osborne will never again deviate from that routine.
Which also feels
let his demons out.
Yeah, you're right, exactly. Which also feels very 50s. It's like very safe. It like stay safe, don't step out.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Stay where you are. Stay in your zone.
Right.
And I have to say, Steel Trap is, along with Sudden Fear, my favorite noir film.
Yeah.
And I saw both films when I was a kid in 1952, and then I didn't see them for something like 50 or 60 years because they weren't available.
Yeah,
and then when they became available, I was afraid to see them. Fear that my childhood adulation of these movies, which I remember vividly, would be somehow tarnished.
Yeah.
And I saw them again as an older old adult, and I love them just as much as I did in 1952. They're two
That's
of my
awesome.
all-time favorite films, and I've showed Steel Trap all over, and everybody agrees with me. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous unknown film.
We haven't talked about the marriage, but that's very central here. Teresa Wright plays his wife, Lori. And I think that the couple dynamic is an interesting addition to the noir here. I mean, it's not just like a romantic tension between them as he's trying to get away with all this and not really being completely honest with her, but it's also becomes like this pressure pot that we have of the two of them, of the guilt and fear as it rises as she starts learning things. And I think that's an interesting element that we see the dynamic of them as it kind of continues shaping the rest of the story. And we don't get that often.
Remember, she's the strong one.
Yeah,
She's the
right,
one whose morality cannot be shaken. And she
right.
leaves him because she can't live the way he's proposing. And then he recognizes her moral strength. But also interesting, she tells a white lie to preserve his integrity at the end of the film.
Yeah,
She lies to the business associate, pretending they haven't been away.
right, right, right.
And when he returns at the end, I think there's a question, can that marriage ever be restored to what it was before this fatal weekend?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that we see in a lot of these films where somebody in the relationship of honesty and truth has broken that trust, and it's just like how they'll have to figure out a way to do it, but there will always be that scar.
There'll always be that scar between them and that secret where she was complicit in the white lie of protecting his and I guess her family's reputation.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
marriage probably cannot be restored to what it was. And fascinating moral questions that this film asks.
definitely. All right, next we're going to move into one of noir's most explosive mid 50s mutations, Kiss Me Deadly, where private eye cynicism collides with Cold War paranoia and something far more apocalyptic. This is Robert Aldrich's 1955 film following hard-boiled private detective Mike Hammer as he's pulled into a violent conspiracy involving a mysterious briefcase, a trail of corpses, and a secret so dangerous that it could be the end of the world. This you already mentioned, kind of like atomic noir. We're getting into that here, and I don't know. For me, it felt like a turning point because it was more raw aggression going on in here. And I don't know. Do you see shifts in noir from
Well,
like here
I
moving
don't know that
forward?
I put this as a turning point. I think it would almost be a termination. I think it's the last great private eye story of the
Mm,
classic noir period, which explodes at the end. It
yeah.
ends with an atomic nuclear explosion. We're supposed to believe that Mike Hammer and his secretary get away with it. They seem to survive. I
Yeah.
doubt it, but they seem to survive.
Yeah.
But I don't think it leads to anything. I think it's the end. And Robert Aldrich's direction is so baroque and over the top
Oh,
that it seems like a
wild.
kind of last statement in the very to the very dignified and really self-contained Maltese Falcon of 1941, which is often said, as you intimated, the beginning of quotes classic noir. This
Yeah.
is the end.
Okay.
And then when we come back to the private eye in the 60s, in neo noir, we're in very different territory.
Yeah, right. They're in a totally different space and time. And as you said, they're often reflecting the time that they're in. And I think that this one definitely is, we're feeling the atomic age anxiety in here, the Cold War paranoia, all of that runs through this film a lot. And it makes Mike Hammer feel, I mean, he feels more abrasive than even Sam Spade did. I mean, there's an element to him that's harsh and much harsher masculinity.
Much harsher, and Ralph Meeker has a different aura than Humphrey Bogart. Um, and his sexuality is more understandable than Bogart's. Every woman in this film seems to fall for him within the first 30 seconds, and he takes advantage of it. Uh, but on the other hand, he recognizes an insuperable adversary, and when he sees what that box contains, he's out of there.
Yeah.
He knows
Right,
when
right.
to step away.
Right,
which is, I
right.
guess, why he, quote, survives at the end.
Yeah, right. Hard to say. It's the great what's it that we have at the center of this in the briefcase.
But
It's
but it, but it, it is an explosive ending, which
yeah. Oh
marks
yeah.
not a turning point in noir, but an end to a subgenre of noir, the private eye saga.
Yeah.
This is the last of the line,
Fascinating.
in my opinion.
Interesting. Okay. Um, does it feel like film noir is starting to break apart by this point?
Maybe because this film and the one we're about to talk about, Touch of Evil, the noir stylistics become so theatrical and emphasized and knowing and self-aware that it's as if the film is aware of all the devices and techniques it's using in a very self-conscious, foregrounded way, as if let's get it out of our system, as if for the last time, and move on to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's pivot actually to a different kind of corruption and sweet smell of success, where power and moral decay operate in plain sight in the media. This is Alexander McKendrick's film from 1957. The film follows a powerful New York newspaper columnist and the ambitious press agent who does his bidding as they manipulate reputations, relationships, and careers in a ruthless battle for influence and control. This is definitely a shift because corruption is not in the dark streets, but it's kind of celebrity culture and this whole machine that is cranking away of public image. But I still feel like it feels so noir still, and I'm wondering what you make of that when you're talking about kind of like this criminal element that makes up noirs. Like, is it just moral corruption that taps
Well,
this one in?
if we hold noir to the strict accounting of a crime at the center of the story, would Sweet Smell of Success qualify?
I guess it
A
depends on what you're
moral
calling a
crime,
crime.
right?
Yeah, the moral crime. Yeah, I mean, he certainly is committing a career assassination with this musician. But does that
But
fit?
is there an actual crime?
Right. I know. That's
Is there something you can be put in prison for or tried for?
I
Or
yeah,
is it or
that's
is it sort of a moral corruption?
exactly. Well, and that's my question. Like, would you say that this firmly fits in as a film noir, or
No, I wouldn't actually.
is it more stained?
I would put people love this film, and so it's incorporated into the noir canon because people want to show it, and it always gets a good response, and it is terrific.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it's not hardcore film noir. I'd put it definitely in the definite category of noir stained. Whereas my
Okay.
favorites, Sudden Fear and Steel Trap, to me are full-fledged noir,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
full-fledged, and this is not.
What I do think is interesting, and I guess we'll just speak to the stained nature of this one then. I think that it's so interesting watching the performances of Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster that have a predatory sense. And, we do see that some, I think that there's a predatory sense that we're getting out of the femme fatales for sure. And I'm wondering if that's just a nature of like how they were building these characters to imbue them with that darkness.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. That absolutely the case. The characters are noir at heart.
Yeah.
The characters are deeply noir stained, more than noir stained. But I would still say noir adjacent. Are they criminals?
Yeah. Again, it boils down to what we're calling criminals,
Right.
right? Yeah. And certainly, I mean, in the realm of a job, and I guess this is an interesting element, like in the realm of a job, if you're a press agent, is if you're not following the moral code of press agents, or if you're a newspaper columnist and you're not following the moral code of newspaper columnists, are you committing a crime in that world? I mean, on a different podcast that we have, the next reel, we were just talking about frauds and liars, and somebody like Stephen Glass, who is a journalist, made up stories. He didn't go to jail for it or anything like that, but he's a criminal in the eyes of the world of journalism. And so I guess, I don't know, are these two enough criminal. Could we call them criminals within the world that they work?
Yes. As you describe it, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's an interesting element. And maybe that's part of the shift. And maybe that's why it still feels so noir, because it feels like it feels like they're criminals, even if, as you said, there's nothing here that they're going to go to jail for.
But they seem to operate in a kind of criminal underworld, even if that's not literally the case. It feels morally and even spatially and visually the case. The film looks like hardcore film noir, doesn't it?
Oh, well, yeah.
I
The
mean,
way
its
it's lit.
treatment of Times Square with the
Yeah.
flashing lights, you feel it's a neon uh, uh, landscape in which crime is made to flourish, could flourish, does
Yeah.
flourish.
Yeah. The dialogue, the way that their patter is played, like all of it
Absolutely.
feels very
It all
much.
has a criminal staccato feel to it. It has the element of the boys in the back room I was talking about. The hardcore vernacular poetry.
Yeah.
It's a great film, not fully noir, but embraced by noiristas as one of our own.
Yeah. Well, let's close out the run. We've already mentioned it. We're going to land on Touch of Evil, where corruption is no longer hidden, but embedded in the very institutions meant to uphold the law. This is Orson Welles' film from 1958. It begins with a car bomb on the U.S. Mexico border and unfolds into a nightmarish story of police corruption, moral compromise, and the collapse of legal authority. This is such a fantastic film. For my purposes, I rewatched the 1958 release as opposed to the re-edited version, just because I wanted to have what people were watching at the time in my head as we had our conversation. And I think it's such an interesting example of just like this. I don't know, a film that feels like at the edge of self-destruction. Like the way that Orson Welles does it and directs it and acts in it. All of it feels very self-destructive, I think.
Well, I think people, understandably, critics place this as coming at the end of the line.
Yeah,
That this
right.
is noir carried to its ultimate expression, and to go any further is to almost enter elements of self-parody. That the quotes genre, the movement, had to end with this final testament to it. And for me, although it has an interesting story about the corruption of the sheriff and so forth, for me, I almost don't pay that much attention to the plot. I'm completely seduced by the technical and visual virtuosity.
Mm.
This is a director's film par excellence. It's just a director showing off, a director who understands noir and uses its elements in an almost operatic, stylized way. What could you do after this film? It's a great gift to historians because we like to have things very neatly dated. Oh, this is the beginning and this is the end. And of course, history never cooperates that way, really. But this seems to give us a termination point, except there's a movie the next year that can make an equal case for the end of classic noir. Do you know Odds Against Tomorrow?
Mm. Okay. I don't know if I've seen that one, so
Excuse me. Odds
I'll,
Against Tomorrow.
I'll have to check that one out. I haven't seen it.
Which ends with a literal apocalypse. Excuse me,
Okay.
sorry.
That's all right. Bless you. So another one that
Ends
fits
with a
into
literal apocalypse.
the Kiss Me Deadly world. Then
It is a compliment to Kiss Me Deadly. And the apocalypse in this 1959 film noir seems to be an almost more logical termination point than the so-called death of noir with Touch of Evil.
Interesting. This you talked about it being kind of a director's film par excellence, and I think that's something so amazing with this film. And I guess you can even going back to like Kiss Me Deadly. There's something that's very expressionistic about how Wells chose to tell this story with distorted angles, like some beautiful long takes, like the whole opening sequence, the just shadows everywhere.
It
And
shows off directorial virtuosity at every moment. And you could say that the director gets in front of the story.
Hmm.
He doesn't tell the story. He sifts the story through his own operatic visual sensibility, and it
Yeah.
becomes an Orson Welles film,
Yeah.
a masterful one. Wouldn't want it any different, but not a film that's devoted primarily to story. It isn't. It's a film devoted primarily to its style.
Yeah. And as you said, it is rich with style, absolutely rich. Um, is this, you kind of talked about how much this really is recognized as the end of it all. Are we starting to see it turning into like a proto, I don't know, or a proto neo noir? Would we even go there?
Not really, because when I would put the beginning of neo noir with Point Blank in 1967.
Oh, so almost
And
10 years
that's
later.
a very different worldview, a very
Yeah.
different look, a very different design, different sense of language and of sexuality, even, and of even movie star uh, performance. It's a different world.
Wow.
We're in the
Okay.
60s. We're
Yeah.
clearly in the 60s in that neo noir film. In Touch of Evil, we're still very much in the 50s.
This is another interesting one where we're not necessarily looking at, like, there's no femme fatale here necessarily, but there is a relationship at the core between Charlton Heston's character and Janet Leigh's character, and uh, their new relationship, and how, I don't know, I guess it's very 50s how she gets kind of abused, right? Where with the drugs and everything, like that's something that feels like of its era. The fear of drugs and reefer madness and all of that sort of thing. Um, is that like, are we starting to see other elements of like the 50s bleeding in with things like that here?
I wouldn't make too much of that.
No. Okay.
No, that doesn't quite feel like what's going on.
Yeah.
The relationship is a very 50s relationship.
Yeah.
Sure. She's clever and she's a survivor, but she's very much a 50s wife, and they will have a very happy relationship, except the film does get into areas that are now not acceptable because you have a casting that goes against current ideology. You have
Yeah.
Charlton
Right.
Heston playing a Mexican character. You have
Yeah.
Marlene Dietrich playing a Mexican or a gypsy. I'm not sure, but not German.
Something.
You
Yeah.
have
Right.
Akim Tamaroff, Russian, playing Mexican character.
Right.
And Mexico is associated with evil. That's always been the case in film noir, by the way. If characters from America go into Mexico, they're headed into deep trouble.
Huh. Interesting. Interesting.
Always.
Yeah. Well, I mean, taken together, I think that these films, we're tracing an interesting evolution over the course of it, from kind of private temptation and fatal romance into psychological fracture, domestic paranoia, Cold War dread, and really setting the stage for what these shadows would go on to influence in the decades ahead. We're going
And
to
I
take a
think, Andy, what
yeah,
you mentioned there is important to point out, that film noir is very adaptable to current politics and history and ideology and morality. So film noir can be molded and changed according to changes in the culture that produces and consumes the films.
yeah,
An elastic genre, which is why we still have it. We call it neo noir,
yeah,
but it's
right,
still
right.
there. It's just in a different form because it's adapted to keep up.
Well, and I think that fits very much to what we were saying earlier, how it feels it's more slippery than just calling it a genre, right? It's just
Yes.
something that feels like it can kind of sneak in all over the place. That's its nature.
It's sneaky and adaptable and elastic.
Yeah.
And the genres that don't last, or the movements that don't last, are the ones that don't have much give. Whereas
Right.
there's a lot of give in film noir.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to step back and look at what noir goes on to influence. All right, we've talked about the films, and as we kind of step back from them, it's definitely easy to notice how it doesn't disappear so much as kind of like migrate and shift and morph. When you look at what comes after this classic cycle of noir that we've been talking about, where do you see the strongest afterlife of noir.
Well, the fact that noir stories can still be told. I mean,
Yeah,
the basic narrative templates, some of which we've talked about here, are still usable
sure.
with different visual style and different sense of contemporary behavior and morality. But the basic templates are still usable. I would say the basic one is the temptation of the middle class character, either tempted by lust or greed, or invaded by noir mischance or mistiming. Let's go back and take our two central characters as the ones played by Frederick Murray in Double Indemnity and Edward G. Robinson in
Scarlet Street.
Scarlet Street. In Double Indemnity, Walter Neff is tempted by greed, lust, desire. In Scarlet Street, the Edward G. Robinson character is pretty much a victim of mischance.
Yeah.
That the world, fate, conspires against him, conspires against his well-being. And when he's taken off his track, he is tempted by desire, yes. But that's not the initial impulse. The initial problem or aggravation or switch in his life is mischance of being at the wrong place at the wrong time, which can happen in film noir and happens all the time in film noir. Wrong timing, bad timing, shouldn't have been there. If he hadn't been there, it wouldn't have happened, and then we wouldn't have had the good film. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, what were they pulling from noir as we would continue into the 60s? Like we see like the paranoia thrillers in the 60s, the 70s. Is that pulling from kind of the tone that noir was setting? Yeah.
paranoia doesn't go away. It may change
No.
its stripes a bit, but paranoia, distrust, suspicion in personal relationships, in marriage, in institutions, in society is not a part of life in America ongoing, life in the world ongoing.
True, for sure. Filmmakers will continue kind of pulling from noir over the course of it. We definitely see that in the 60s and 70s. Roman Polanski, Martin Scorsese, Coppola, even into present day filmmakers like David Fincher. I think we're seeing some interesting moral ambiguity in the way that they're drawn to their stories, along with visual language. When you look at like the classic noir, what elements have remained the most durable? I mean, we've already talked about like all those things you just talked about, like the draw to the crime, the moral dilemmas and everything. But are there other elements of noir that
Oh, yeah,
that you're
sure.
yeah what
There's the mise en scène of entrapment, enclosure, confinement. That's always grist for the good filmmaker's mill. A story in which you can show characters framed within the frame,
yeah
in which you can show shadows encroaching upon the characters. So all of these essential visual icons of noir from the beginning are recyclable and reusable ad infinitum to any creative filmmaker. It's a rich load of visual style that film noir offers.
yeah, and I think again that speaks to why it doesn't feel like a genre so much as you said, this style that just is easy to adapt and spread and
And spread
stay.
and renew and
Yeah,
reinvigorate and find new
yeah.
ways of doing it, new patterns, but based on the same old not stereotypes, the same essential molds that then are reinterpreted.
Well, and I think that might be why the films still to this day, as you have mentioned, still feel so immediate, right? Because their shadows, the shadows that they reveal, haven't gone away. Like we still have all of these shadows. We still have all these temptations. All of this is still stuff that just as human nature we deal
Well,
with.
lust and desire, greed, aren't they recurrent,
Yeah,
universal human characteristics?
yeah, exactly. Stepping back from all of this, just to kind of close this out, what do you think noir ultimately reveals about the post-war American psyche?
I think you said it earlier on. the darkness beneath the appearance of adjustment, wealth, consumerism, conformity, the darkness within, the anxiety beneath the apparently and deceptively well organized, well functioning surface. Yes, it
Hmm.
seemed like a time of prosperity, but beneath the prosperity, allied to it almost indivisibly, is this suspicion, paranoia, uncertainty, insecurity, fear, all the qualities of the Cold War and the Red Menace period were perfect fodder for noir, and they're recurrent. They
Yeah.
exist with us still. We have different names for the different attributes of left and right. And let's not get into the to politics. Which, today's politics mirror the politics of the blacklist period. The
Yeah.
terms of left and right have shifted, and the power of left and right, but the same kinds of divisions are apparent. We just call it. We give them different labels and political titles now,
Yeah.
but the inherent political divisions and suspicion and demonization of the political other, the fear of the genuine, because I'm old enough to know there was a genuine fear of communists in the 50s, a real fear
Yeah.
of communists and a suspicion that anybody might be a communist. They didn't wear signs. Anybody could be a communist, and if they were, you had to be prepared. Of
Hmm.
great uncertainty. A communist could be your next door neighbor, could be your husband or wife, your child.
Yeah. Right.
There's a
Right.
great and unseen film called My Son John. My son John is a communist.
Hmm. Yeah. That's a fascinating and important element to remember with all of this is just how all of that the zeitgeist of the times affects it so much, but it's really a lot of the same elements that we're seeing today. So
I mean, the current moment gives us so many ripe opportunities for noir stories.
yeah, no, it totally does, really does. Well, Foster, it has been an absolute delight talking with you about film noir. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And it's
You're
been a
very welcome.
privilege. It's been a privilege digging through all of the movies with you. Some
Yes.
great choices,
Okay.
even if some
Remember,
of them aren't your fans or
some
your
of them are not
favorites.
my favorites. But for all the people listening and watching, Sudden Fear and Steel Trap, see those two. You will thank me.
Excellent, excellent. Before we go, where can listeners find your work and where okay, there you go. You've got your book, Hollywood and the Movies of the 50s. So
Which with a great title, which was given to me, not mine, can't claim, but by my wonderful editor at Knopf, Victoria Wilson. Here's the subtitle: The Collapse of the Studio System, the Thrill of Cinerama, and the Invasion of the Ultimate Body Snatcher, Television.
yeah, there you go.
Good subtitle, not my own, my editor's. But she read the book carefully and she came up with that brilliant subtitle.
Well, kudos. Yeah, I think that works well.
That that's the book I'm proudest of, Andy. I've worked the longest on it and the hardest on it, and it's the book I wanted to write, and I'm proud of it. So I hope
That's
people
fantastic.
will read it and respond to me at my website, fosterhirsch.inc, which is how you got to me.
Yep, exactly. Everybody check out the book. I've been working through it myself and really enjoying the story that you're laying out there of the 50s and how everything was changing. It's such a fascinating decade. Well, that's it. So again, thank you so much, Foster. Next month, I'm staying in this post-war moment, but shifting genres again. When we started this run with westerns and science fiction, we were tracing how a culture absorbs victory and uncertainty at the same time. The frontier begins to crack, the monsters arrive, and in noir, the shadows move inside the house. And once those shadows move inside, they don't stay confined to crime stories. They seep into relationships, into marriage, into class anxiety, into the fear of being seen or misseen by the world around you. That's where we're headed next. Next month, we move into domestic melodrama, where that same pressure plays out not in back alleys or border towns, but in living rooms. Join me next month for post-war domestic melodramas. Thank you for joining us on CinemaScope, part of True Story FM Entertainment Network. Music by Orcus and Ian Post. Find us and the entire Next Reel family of film shows at truestory.fm. Follow at The Next Reel on social media, and if you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and review wherever you listen. As we part ways, remember, your cinematic journey never ends. Stay curious. We have a few questions. Are you good with time? Are you able to stick around for a couple
there's some questions from the house, so to speak.
Yeah, some questions from the house. Exactly. First one, and this is some interesting ones. Did the major studios have different styles of noir? How would you describe those? And do you have a favorite studio?
Wonderful question. And the answer is yes and yes. The studios have their own style, and I do have my favorite noir studio. I think it's everybody's, actually, RKO.
Excellent. Excellent. Would you call any Hitchcock movies film noir?
Yes.
Shadow of Doubt, Notorious, Strangers on a Train.
They're often not considered noir. They're considered Hitchcock thrillers. I disagree. Strangers on a Train, Rear Window, Vertigo, North by Northwest, The Wrong Man, all film noir. All film noir.
Do you think film noir can extend to comedies, or does the comedy need to be more of a side dish than the main course? Double Indemnity is really funny at times.
There lots of film noir have very ironic touches and produce laughter by design.
Yeah.
But if the predominant tone of the film or the predominant intention of the film is comedy, I would be hesitant to call it noir.
Gotcha.
Comedy. I think comedy would be the dominant characteristic.
So you might be able to have a comedy that is maybe stained a little bit with some noir tones.
Stained, I would tend to distrust it, but you could certainly have a noir, and probably should have a noir, stained with plenty of dark irony.
Yeah, right. How did film noir change as TV became more universal in the 50s in America and networks started creating their own crime shows?
Well, something like Dragnet, which was the most popular of the crime shows of the 50s, I wouldn't call that film noir. That's a crime show. It's a crime story.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering what they're saying, like how change as that became more popular, like those crime shows in TV.
It actually, that's a good point. With the popularity of TV crime, there were fewer movie crime. The number of film noir in the 50s got smaller and smaller. So there was just a trickle by the end of the decade. I think a lot of the appetite for that was taken up by television programming.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite lines of dialogue from film noir?
Oh, yes. I have my absolute favorite line of dialogue is, guess what, from Sudden Fear.
Okay.
When Joan Crawford has discovered her husband's treachery, but she's pretending she doesn't know. And she says to him, wonderful noir irony, I was just thinking what I've done to deserve you. And then as she turns away from him, she gives a look to the camera.
Right.
And when I alert audiences to that moment in the film, and then Joan Crawford, Jack Palance is not seeing her. She's turned away from him. The look is for us. The audience invariably applauds. That is a great acting moment.
Yeah, great moment, right. Let's see. How incestuous do you think JJ is with his sister Susan? Has that been consummated, or do you think JJ is just putting those feelings totally into obsessive control and possession?
The latter. Not consummated.
Yeah.
Probably he isn't even conscious of it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
No, he's just so totally obsessive and controlling. And by the way, I'm talking out of school here, people who knew him say that Burt Lancaster, in playing that role, no acting there.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Good to know. Do you see any noir influence on the blaxploitation subgenre and some of its notable films? For example, Trouble Man, Shaft, or Black Caesar?
No, those are very poorly made films. They're bad films. No, I don't see a connection.
But no influence though.
No.
What movies are received most differently by studios today compared to decades past? Either love to dislike or indifferent to favorites. Anything that you're seeing and how they're reacting to them?
I'm not sure I follow the question. Sorry.
From the students that you have now,
The
are
students.
yeah, are you finding that there are certain films that they love more than students in the past loved, or they dislike films that students in the past loved?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Most of the time, students are very responsive to the films that I show. I don't show contemporary films. I only show the classic era. And most of the time they're very responsive. But there are two cases where I won't say I had a rebellion, but I had students who hated the film. And one time I knew they were going to hate it.
Mm.
I said, I'm going to show you this movie. It got the Academy Award. It was a huge success in its day, and you're absolutely going to hate it. And they did. And that was a musical called Gigi.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And one student said, you're showing us a film about grooming and about pedophilia.
Yeah.
And I couldn't shake him from that conviction. He said, and I said, it played for a year on Broadway in a legitimate theater. It was as if it was a brand new musical, and it was absolutely beloved. But I can see that it's dated. I warned you, didn't I, that you were going to hate it? Yeah. They did. I'm afraid to show it again, but I'm tempted to show it again. And the other, my students hate Katharine Hepburn.
Really?
She seems mannered and artificial and from a different world, that they can't identify with her. She seems very dated. Barbara Stanwyck of the Golden Age actresses is the ones they find least stylized.
Oh, okay.
She seems very real and accessible to them. Katharine Hepburn comes from a different world. You can see that.
How do they react with Joan Crawford?
Well, they love Sudden Fear. They'd better, but they love it. They love it. But I haven't shown that much. I mean, she's very vulnerable in a lot of her late films where she verges on or descends into camp.
Yeah.
In Sudden Fear.
Right. Okay. Well, that's it. And then one last message here. Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. It's always great to see you at Film Noir events and rep theaters. So look at that.
Oh, somebody said that.
Somebody said that in the comments.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So
thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we appreciate you being here. All right, I'm going to end this.